Hi, Tracy Brown here. Oops, sorry. I have been trying to record this video about my story probably a couple different times in the last couple weeks. Not sure what that's about, that either my iPad wouldn't work or my phone didn't have enough storage, or there was always some reason why I started going on this and it wasn't working. So if this goes to its entirety, whether it's 5 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, then I guess this was right timing. So I'm outside on my lanai, so if you hear noises of the breeze or my dog barking or whatever, we're just going to keep rolling through it. But I feel like this video is for everybody, and I think a lot of times when maybe people who follow me in terms of the intuitive eating piece hear me talk about eating disorders, I don't want you, if you're listening to this, to feel like that you have to tune out, that that's not for you. But this story is for everybody, because just because you didn't struggle with like a label that somebody put on you or that even you hold for yourself, that doesn't mean that you're not struggling enough to hear this message and learn from it and hopefully get hope that things get better and can get freer and more joyful. And I'm still on that path too. So, gosh, I guess to start with, I will just say that I feel like I brought this in with me in some way of, it's hard to think about the right words, but people pleasing and being super sensitive and having the way the world is right now and has been, I guess, since I was born in the late 70s. It was going to be profoundly impacting towards my sense of self. And then, so I have my personality characteristics that would lead someone in this direction towards struggling with food. But I remember as early as 5 years old thinking, oh gosh, like, what's wrong with me? You know, why am I so sensitive? And that message was reinforced, certainly. You know, I could feel most everything around me coming from the environment. And that was definitely profoundly confusing, as well as can sense what was going on with, you know, initially what was going on with all the people around me, my family, and their struggles and their pain. And I definitely tried to be a little adult to help just people feel better. And in two ways that would make them feel better and make me feel better, to not have to feel so much discomfort around me. And then just over time, lots of messages of the right way to be. And so I fought that for a long time. And it seems, being a first grader wouldn't seem like a long time, but I think I spent the first 2 years of my life, you know, trying to figure out like how I need to be okay, but still not give myself up and not be myself. And so that was exhausting. And so I started trying to be what the world wants us to be, which is good and pleasing and not take up too much space and be good, and in my circumstances don't be too loud, and be really bright and shiny, but know that bothers some people too, so tone it down when you need to. And on top of all that, I definitely had perfectionism not on my side and harm avoidance. Yeah, so that was a way to survive. So I did that for a really, really long time. And then when I would go through, like, let's say, different periods of life where different teachers, and depending on their harshness, depending on the stressors in my family, of what was going on in them, would ramp up, like how people-pleasing and perfect I would try to be. All at the same time thinking that I wasn't able to see where I did very well. It just, if I did well in something, and I did well, honestly, with most everything, school, and for the most part, I would say friends, but definitely not feeling that loved or connected. But I was really good at putting on a show, for sure, of things are okay. And so as the years went by, I started like putting away who I was and putting away joy, and just because it felt safer. And I couldn't expend, there's only so much energy you have to give, and I would give it all to what I felt around me needed me to be. And so things kind of escalated internally, more and more losing myself. So I got to about to junior high. That was a really rough time, and I would had a few little bits of acting out. And all this is important because I think one of the few reasons I probably didn't develop eating and body image issues that much earlier than I did, which was the start of my restricting was at 16, but probably in junior high it easily could have happened. But I happened to have a very strong, empowered female sports coach who really like pushed me to be myself. And it didn't matter that I was the shortest on the team and probably not the strongest, but I was really applauded for my heart. And I feel like I'm going to tear up a little bit with that because even though I don't see this person, that relationship is still really special to me today in terms of I so needed that. And that buoyed me for a little bit longer, actually. And so there were a couple good years, definitely early high school, where I felt like still feeling super insecure and not liking myself and not feeling I was worth much. And by the way, you would think like, well, why did it happen? And I didn't have so much overt trauma in my life, definitely, but just not a lot of reinforcement that I was good. Even though I know that my family loved me very much, but there wasn't much fun, there wasn't much joy, just a lot of work and a lot of being good, and so that's what I felt like I needed to be, and even that was just kind of the expectation. So, not that it's not that people call me dumb or worthless or stupid, but my own programming and what I came into being programmed in terms of having to be good and work really hard, and there wasn't a lot of frivolity or silliness, little bits, and that was great, but it was always kind of back to work, so it was like a little blip in comparison. So, flash forward, by the time I get to high school, there's a mix of like a little bit finding my way but still not feeling like worthy or lovable. And then I had a couple series of, I guess first boyfriends, and those experiences were really good, but really difficult because I was coming into like understanding that as a female, there was so much objectification of I need to, again, be desirable in certain ways, and not only physically, but also basically this idea of just my experiences were if we're not going to go to the next level, which is have sex, you're not going to be that desirable, even if you're nice and you're kind and you're funny or just good to be around. That wasn't going to be enough, and so that was definitely the breaking point for me. Of I wasn't willing to go to certain levels, and those relationships ended, within the 4 or 5 month mark. And by the second time that happened to me, the time that I was finishing my sophomore year of high school, I was like, I'm done. I've had enough, and it broke. I broke. I couldn't. I felt like I didn't have any more hope, and I felt like I couldn't do any more, literally on this planet. And I started to control food. And by the way, I didn't have any overt negativity towards me and my looks and my body. In fact, I kind of felt like I knew that culturally I had I had privilege. I didn't know I had privilege at the time, but I do, and I know I do. I'm white, I'm thin. I know the way I look is there's some level of fitting some molds, at least, not all molds, but some. And so, but at the time I didn't know that or see that. I just still felt I wasn't good enough. It didn't matter. And so I didn't, like I said, again, I didn't have any stringent, like, you're not thin enough, you're not this enough. But I felt that so much internally. I started restricting because it was so strange. Like, it was the beginning of it seemed so like, how did that fit that moment? But I started watching these weird, like old cable TV. It was in the mid-90s, like exercise channels. Denise Austin. I found her and I thought, this woman is crazy for how happy she is about like not eating bread or not eating whatever and exercising like a maniac. But I'll just do that. It definitely it felt like it just hooked me. And prior to that, it's not that I didn't recognize, and I'm backing up a little bit more to say, like, I recognized by the time I was 8 or 9 years old that like thinner was better. I knew that, and I knew that because of the diets I'd seen my mom on, and how it was always just like hope and like happiness. And like, oh, I'm starting this new diet. And again, my mother actually was very on the down low with it. She hid it, but I knew. Again, I can read. I knew what she was doing. And also, I had another significant influence, my grandmother in my life, that I think very much struggled with some levels of lots of unworthiness, shame about her own self. And she was a chronic dieter and was very open about how much she disliked her body, and did talk about other people's bodies all the time. And so I learned very early on that if I didn't want that kind of judgment, I better watch it. I didn't know what that meant when I was 8 or 9 or 10, but I hoped that I wouldn't grow up to be bigger, because that would evoke criticism from the people I love the most. So I wanted to avoid that. So I think that seed was planted long ago, that I knew that anyway. And I think coming back full circle to when I was 16, and this felt like something I could do to feel better. That, along with those old memories, just came flooding in, like in a moment of like, F it, I'm done. And pretty quickly, I got pretty numbed out. And so within a matter of, I would say, 6 months of restricting, I was gone. I had lost weight fairly quickly because I was already like at, I was still growing. So by the time I only had 3 periods in my life, they were gone, and they disappeared for 2 years. So it took very little for me to of restricting to health-wise go downhill. And so I deteriorated. It got worse and worse and worse throughout the last 2 years of high school, to the point by the middle of my senior year I knew I was going to die. And my parents started me in therapy, and I wasn't there. I tried for 3 months, and it didn't go get very far. I was just too far gone, and I pretty much admitted myself to a place. Of course, it's one of those places that say they take eating disorders, and very few are very good, this one included. And it was just a place where all kinds of people who were struggling with mental health issues went. It was actually very damaging and pretty unsafe, and it probably scared the crap out of me enough to where, like, I don't want to be back in this place again. And I wasn't there long, a couple weeks, got some refeeding in, and then came home. And in the midst of that, and I wouldn't say in that hospitalization that I had a pretty profound moment of, I had a roommate when I was still being medically stabilized, that she was dying, and she was an older woman, and here I am by myself, just turned 18 years old, and I'm on the way out too. And I had this for the first time, it's like actually literal feelings of, and I can't explain the whole, and that's probably another video to explain the whole, that whole experience, but gosh, very, very profound. And I realized that if I wanted not to continue to hurt myself and pretty much the people I loved, that I would have to take some huge risk and start to feel the feelings. That's what heals diet trauma and eating disorders. But I would say, if you're listening to this and you're just wanting to be more of an intuitive eater and stop dieting, this is for you too. We have to feel the feelings and get out of the repression that dieting causes and over-exercise causes. Because when we're going to the gym, or we're running our miles, or doing whatever it is we're doing, hoping to change the body, we're repressing and we're running. And the same thing it is with any kind of, even trying to eat healthy, when there's too much of that, when it's when there's no flexibility, and it feels fear-based and it's rigid, we're running and we're repressing. And so this is why this video is for you. Again, so I'm going to keep going. So I started recovery. It was brutal and it was slow. When I say brutal, meaning so much emotion from so many years of repressing, how much shame I felt, and how much sadness and anger. and all the ways that I abandoned myself and felt abandoned by others. I had to do lots of deep forgiveness work, and I'm still doing that work, to be honest. So it's not over. It keeps going. There's still work to be done. So forgiveness and learning how to love myself. And, well, first I started with not hating myself as much. And there are places in my life that I do love myself. There are places that are still kind of sketchy with that, so I'm still working on it. After 20 years, this is the 20th year, which is interesting why I'm, I guess, finally doing this video. But it's still ongoing. There's not a finish line. So I don't have food or body weight issues anymore. I could gain weight. I'd be fine with that, because I'm still more focused on being internal with love for myself and in love with life and with Source. So I don't talk too much about religion, definitely, in this, in my practice or even my own practices, but I definitely think there's higher work here, and want to have love and be loved with that is part of this work too. So again, whatever that form that comes in with you, I think that's really important. So I'll kind of leave that at that for now. But yeah, a lot of people had to go in the beginning of my recovery, and it's not that I don't care for those people still to this day. It's just that I didn't have room. I was expending so much energy on myself that if things were negatively distracting, I just couldn't spend the time with that. So a lot of friendships and acquaintances went by the wayside. And by the time I graduated high school, still in a better place, but still pretty fragile. So it had been like January to, I guess, early June, doing so much better health-wise, but still very fragile emotionally, and not even. And at this point, there was still so much repression, but I was thawing out at least. So it took a long time. So I want to let you know that like 6 months is nothing compared to your whole life of what got you here. So if you are working on intuitive eating or just relearning how to eat again and stop other kind of behaviors of binging or emotional eating, if you've been at this 2 weeks or 6 months or a year and you think that that should be enough, it's not. It's going to take you a while, and it's going to take as long as it takes. There's nothing wrong with that, and we can give up the shame about that too. They should have this figured out, because I still don't have it all figured out. In terms of wholeheartedly in my bones believe that like there's nothing wrong with anyone's body. Totally believe that. I believe that health, like pursuing health, is something is a choice. It's not a mandate. It's not something that means anything about you. And if you choose not to, it doesn't mean that you don't care about yourself. It just means that's not your choice. And if you're at a loving place for yourself and that's not your choice, that's fine. And nobody can tell you differently. So, and even those statements take a long time for people to even come around to that. And if you're listening to the video and you want to like get out and bail right now, I totally understand, because, and come back to this later when you're maybe more open to it. But pursuing thinness is repression, pursuing like even perfect health. If it's out of fear and out of like bypass, it's still repressing. When I say bypass, I mean bypassing your emotions, bypassing being fully in yourself. So anyway, in terms of treatment, I will say something, that it's super, super important to find the right fit. And one of the reasons I'm talking to you today, and probably the reason I became a dietitian, not because, oh my gosh, I mean, I was interested in how the body works and the how-tos of things. That was really interesting to me. But before I had an eating disorder, I had a really good relationship with food. I ate what I wanted. I stopped when I was full. My mom cooked a variety of foods. And we ate what we needed. So there wasn't an issue, really. Which is why some people, when you talk to them in their history, you could see the eating disorder was definitely coming. For me, it was just the avenue I chose to repress. But it wasn't out of like lots of, I mean, definitely, again, I had like the examples of there's a right way for a woman to be, and to grow up to be a woman, you have to worry about your food intake. So, I mean, that was my doorway, I guess, but it wasn't around health really, and it wasn't around like, it was overtly like food rules and calorie counting in my life. It was on the periphery, but because I'm such a sensitive and an empath, that I saw what the message was, and I took that to heart very easily. So, anyway, with support, it's so important. So, the person that steered me on the idea that like food is not magic, food is not scary, food is food, was a dietitian I had. And literally, I probably only had 6 sessions with her. But it clicked on something that I knew intuitively, was that I knew that we were born this way, to be able to know how to manage from an inner directed place our hunger and fullness. And we did need experts, which is funny because I went on to become a dietitian as a quote unquote expert. And so we'll talk about that later, because I'm definitely the kind of dietitian that doesn't see myself as above you. You have what's in you. My God is my job, I think, or my calling is to help you move past the layers of and peel back the layers of mirage around the fact that you can't, or that we've been programmed to believe that we can't be our own body and nutrition experts, and we can learn to listen to our body for what's good and right for us. So, but anyway, you had to start somewhere, right? So, yeah, from her I learned about there's no good food or bad food, and we really didn't talk about intuitive eating. It's one of those situations where, again, because of my own self-hatred, I pushed her away. In the guise of, I made it to my parents, like, oh, I'm fine, don't spend the money, because I didn't feel worthy of having the support. And so you'll hear me talk to clients and people in sessions, like, and I'll hear objections like, I can't do this work, I can't afford it. And is that coming from a place of lack of self-love and pushing away support and love that could be offered to you? And that happens so much, that people are doing well, and I think that starts to get real, that they start bumping up against the feelings more and those unworthiness feelings, and they bail. And I get it. I did it. Luckily, I came back around and resumed work later on, and to get the healing and the support I needed. So again, beginning of college, did some work with that great dietitian that introduced me to actually not even intuitive eating. The language wasn't there yet. This is the mid-90s. It wasn't there yet, but only in little tiny pockets. But Janine Roth was there, and that's who I was introduced to at first, and I thought that was crazy, to eat chocolate chip cookie dough every meal, and to the point where she was so sick of it. But I deep down I understood, even though I was just still too in the beginnings of my eating disorder to be able to go there and do that. So it took me a long time to get there. I did have a therapist for a year and a half, and he was a very good man, but just didn't have the kind of style and the kind of what I needed, which was like, I needed to be loved. I needed to be mirrored love, and not just mirror back a blank slate of like, let's analyze what you just did. And he was good, and I think that helped me have a good experience, though, of therapy not being weird or scary or hurtful or harmful. Not to say that there are definitely experiences that people have that are that. But at least for me, it was a doorway of like, okay, this is a path that people can take, and I continued to take that later on. So, needless to say, I was a therapy and nutrition therapy / intuitive eating beginnings dropout, and so I go to college. And that's when I was very, very lost. I needed more support, and I ended up actually in a very terrible, relationship that really deepened me into the eating disorder in different ways again. I had a little hope and a little space there for a short time, and because I stopped treatment, and I was still too emotionally fragile, by doing that, I dived back into it because I was actually with a sociopath, and it was really abusive and awful. And it lasted 4 years, and it should have ended. And again, because I didn't trust my gut and love myself enough to trust my instincts, I knew within the first couple of meetings with this person that it was bad, really, really bad. But I pushed it off.